Good evening and welcome to LegalTech Live. I'm your host, Nick Rishwain. I'm here with our guest, Haley Altman. Many of you know her. She's been in legal tech for quite some time. She's been very successful in legal technology. Let me give you a little bio, a little background on Haley. And I didn't even go and get a biography, Haley. I just went to your LinkedIn because it's got this impressive list, and I'm going to ask you to expand upon all of it anyway. But an associate at Ice Miller, associate at Wilson Sonsini, partner at Ice Miller, CEO and co-founder of Doxly, which in 2019 was acquired by Litera, now global head of corporate development at Litera. I mean, you've had quite the legal experience. Your whole career was legal, and then legal tech, and now continuing legal tech. It's almost that Godfather story where you try to get out and they pull you back in.
Pull me back in.
Yeah, that's how I'm viewing it. I mean, it's really, you've had an impressive, and you're a female founder who has an acquisition under her belt, which so many of my founders want to have that happen, right? So many of our guests are like, boy, that would be the best outcome. There's a lot in there. I don't want you to have to go through all of it, but maybe a little of your journey, law school, and how you went to legal tech, and welcome to the show.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I've enjoyed watching other people on. So it's fun to be joining the crew. So yeah, no, it's been quite the interesting journey. I mean, I started out actually more in science. I was going to be like a doctor. I was like, my whole life was committed to doing something totally different than where I am. So it's like really funny that I found my way into this like legal tech world. I just, as I've kind of gone through life, I just see opportunities, and then that excite me. And then I just try to take the risk to go ahead and do it. So after kind of going down a certain pathway, I realized I was just really passionate about like the legal world and like how I could help companies bring things to market. So while I love science, like I did work at Eli Lilly, how do you make it so they can more easily bring drugs to market? So I went into law to like actually do that, to help companies and help science like advance and into the market. So when I started practicing, I was actually a biotech like corporate attorney. So I started in Indy and did a lot of work with the scientific and research community there through law. But then Wilson Sonsini had me come out to be the interface between their tech transfer and their corporate group, because I could explain what the companies raising capital actually did, or what their purpose was, or what they were trying to accomplish. And so, but when you're in Silicon Valley, you cannot help but learn about the software space, the tech space, and that entire world. So it was,
and you were in a more technical practice.
Mm-hmm.
You were working it, so you had a kind of a learning experience there as in the technical field.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I was like, that was one of the fun things about science is I did cancer research when I was in high school and college. And like, you have to like learn and figure out how to try things and come up with new solutions and be willing to be agile and pivot, because things aren't always going to work out the first way you planned for them or how you intended them to kind of come together in the beginning. And so then, when we're raising capital and helping companies grow in this space, you had to kind of realize that it's going to be a journey, and you have to understand what your clients are doing. You have to like really kind of think about what it is they're trying to accomplish and how you can become that trusted advisor to kind of help them go from there. I loved being at Wilson. I loved the West Coast. I had gotten married to a Midwest guy. It was, family from Monticello, has a farm, everything. And so we wanted to come back to Indiana to have a family. And so we moved back, but I was a fifth-year attorney then. And I grew up in Texas. When my family moved here, I went into Indiana when I was in high school. So I didn't like know anyone. I didn't have like a set of relationships that I could go to meet to like make that journey to partner. And so it was like, okay, I have all this tech experience from Silicon Valley, and I've got to like try to get people to understand that I know kind of what they're trying to accomplish. And so I created a series of products within the law firm space itself.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, we could create a startup package. So I worked at Ice Miller, a bigger law firm in Indianapolis. And so a lot of startups would try to do things on their own, and then we would try to fix it later. And that was so much more expensive for them. And so I created a package of a set of like 10 documents, and I productized it so that the attorneys could easily fill it out if the clients filled out a simple like one pager about their business. And then we offered them, time with the attorneys and then a specialist to help them get started. And so I just would go speak at things, and I would just go to tech events, and I would go there, and it wasn't to like become their attorney. It was just to learn about them. And then they started asking me to talk about stuff that was relevant to the community. And so I started getting a bunch of clients with that startup package. And then I was like, well, if they're ever going to be able to pay me again after this very small startup package fee, I probably have to help them raise capital.
Right.
So I created an investor directory of investors in the Midwest, because it's not Silicon Valley. You can't like
Right.
walk down the street and trip over 4 venture capitalists. Like
Right.
you got to search for it. So I created a directory of angel investors and VC funds and that were outside of the state that were willing to invest. And then I asked them like more detailed questions about what are they looking for. And so that's how I got a bunch of clients that I could fund. And then I did fund formations. And then at a certain point, you realize you have so much work that you're like not at home. And I had 2 little kids. I had just had my second baby, and I was trying to make partner the year I had my second daughter. And I was like at the office, and we had one of those moments where we couldn't find the signature page to one of the documents because it wasn't on the closing checklist.
Right.
And it's 3 a.m. and you're panicking. And I'm a senior associate trying to make partner, and I'm like, oh my God, this is me, like we can't close, and it's our fault, it's our client's signature. So you go through all of those like stress and anxiety, and then that was like that catalyst of like, okay, maybe we could do something different. And so I started, was the catalyst for thinking about what Doxly could be, was that like middle of the night panic moment.
Right.
And then I was like, you know what, I've come so far to like make partner. I'm going to see if anyone else has done this. And if they have, then I'll just see if I can get the firm to buy it. If not, then I'll just think about it. And so I finished the year out, made partner, and then took the risk of 1 month later telling the firm, hey, I have an idea. Do you mind if I work on it?
And how did that go? Before, how did that go? Were they like, yes, we'll let you do it. We're all thumbs up, go for it.
They were. Yeah.
That's impressive.
They're like, Haley, it makes sense. It makes sense. We get it. And I was like, I promise I'll work on it. They're like, we're not worried about that. Like, that's not what we're worried about. Like, just, go ahead. So I worked on it the rest of that year, and I was getting ready to work with like one of the benefits of being an attorney that works with a lot of like startups is that you meet the designers in the community, you meet the development shops, you meet other founders. And so I bounced my idea then off a bunch of different people, and was in the process of like working on designs and developing it myself. And then Ice Miller was helping form High Alpha, which is a venture studio. The founder of ExactTarget, who sold it to Salesforce for $2.1 billion, email marketing automation. Yeah, pretty nice exit.
That's pretty nice exit.
Yeah, not too bad. It started and ran the whole business went public and then sold for all in Indiana. So he'd been a client of the firm the whole time. So they're creating this venture studio, and they were like struggling with the pain points of bringing on all of these LPs for the fund they were putting together. And so they went to Ice Miller and said, hey, we want to potentially do something in legal. What do you think? And they're like, we think you should talk to Haley.
Oh, nice.
So they talked to me, and it was like a good conversation, but our ideas were a little bit further apart. And so like 2 months later, they came back and were like, we want you to present what the problem is, because we've been researching and we think it's actually broader than we thought.
Okay.
Okay. And I think they thought because I'm an attorney, I would come in and just talk to them and just tell them about the problem. But I'm like, if you get in front of 4 awesome, business leaders and venture capitalists, like you come prepared. So I put a deck together, and then I had to have my sister help me because I had no PowerPoint skills. I had lawyer PowerPoint skills.
Right.
Which is just like little bullet points on a slide. And
right. You didn't know how to make it pretty and make it like really pop.
Yeah. So she helped me put in images and like organize it and have it like look good. And I had a name and all this stuff. So the original name for Doxly is actually not Doxly. It was actually the Closing Room, because
just a long name.
Right.
Right.
So I thought that it would be like, it was like a virtual version of that room where you walk around a table and sign documents. I'd done that with
Gotcha.
clients even as much as like 2 years before. And so it was really one of those things where like, okay, we could make that a virtual experience. And so that's why I started. So I presented to them and they're like, Haley, what you're saying is you're going to like decrease the time it takes for attorneys to do something and they bill by the hour. Like,
The story we've been hearing in legal tech for years now.
And I don't know why it just dawned on me. They stopped me like right in the middle, the first part of the presentation where you're just like, oh, okay, I have a whole, like, can you give me 10 more minutes? I was going to just finish this up. And they're like, okay, fine. And I go, all right, Scott. So you guys closed this fund in February, right? Or March, I forget what it was. And he was like, yeah. And I go, okay, well, it's October. Do you have the closing book? And he was like, actually, no, we don't. And I was like, okay, so this was a complicated deal. It's probably going to be a pretty big closing book. It probably would cost about $5,000 to put together. If we send you the bill for that closing book now, would you pay for it? And he was like, absolutely not. It's been like forever. And in fact, I really want it right now. Like, can you, when you go back to the office, can you check into that? And I was like, yeah, I mean, but that's my point. Like, there's so many things that go into these closings, that go into these deals that get written off. These are things that you don't pay for, but that we have to do as part of this process. And it's not something that a paralegal or an attorney will be doing this. This is not going to just, these two things don't just like magically come together at this point.
Right.
So the whole conversation, so we went through it and they invited me to be a part of, so then there was like another month break and then they came back and they're like, we'd like for you to be a part of our sprint week. And then they're like, so would you want to do it? And if so, do you want to be the CEO? Do you want to be on the board? Do you want to be, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, one day ago, I found out I had made equity partner. So I'd been 1 year between income and equity, and that not happened at our firm. And I was like, I just found out I'm going to be equity partner. I can't be the CEO of this company. Like, this is the dream. Like,
right. This is the golden handcuffs. These are the golden handcuffs.
That's right here.
Right.
I kind of have to do it. And so this is December. And so the sprint week was in February. And so I accepted being equity partner. I told them I would only be a board member and I'd be heavily involved. But I had to win sprint week. So my idea went up against their 3 ideas. And it was the first time they brought in an outsider in. And so you've got Scott and like he said this amazing brain power of all these ideas. So it's a little intimidating. And I'm like, here are all these designers and things like that. I'm like, oh, they're probably going to want to work on the B2C company. And here's this legal tech company. And so I was a little self-conscious. And we came in and they were like, this is a real thing. Like, this is a thing. Like, they were like, do you mind if we change all of your designs? I was like, no. they're like, and also the name. And I was like, why the name? It was like this whole thing. It was this whole thing about this intense week-long experience of learning how to build a company, how to position it, how to articulate the problem statement. Like, what are you going to solve it? How are you going to price it? What's the initial design set look like? What's your pathway to like 100 million? Like, that was like one of their things. And so that was the kind of, those early stages.
That was the early stages of Doxly. And Doxly and thank you. I see we've got several people watching in Zoom, Adam, Jasmine, Michelle, and Maureen, and we've got some folks over on Facebook. So if you have questions for our guests tonight, please go ahead and post them. And Haley, if I'm looking over here, I'm looking at a different screen. I'm not ignoring you. Veronica Canton's over here on Facebook. So if you have questions for Haley, please get them in. We'll be happy to answer them on air. And so what was Doxly? So that was the beginning of Doxly. At the time that let's not go fully to the time you sold, but once it went to market, Doxly was a SaaS product for startups to do what?
So it was basically a product to help lawyers get deals done. So
for the lawyers, that's who you're selling to.
Okay. Yeah, so we were actually selling to lawyers. So When I practiced, I realized that there were so many things that we were always we always had these closing checklists. Our deals revolved around this checklist. We would have meetings internally to talk about the checklist. We'd have meetings with the clients to talk about where we were with the checklist. We'd have meetings with the opposing counsel, all around where are these documents, where are these tasks that need to come together in order for us to complete a transaction. That could be a venture financing, helping a company raise money. It could be helping them sell. It could be a real estate transaction, a bank financing. There's so many deals, but at the heart of it, they all kind of have a similar process.
Mm-hmm.
And then we actually wanted to take it all the way through to closing and automate the signature process. I'd seen so many signature pages in my lives, and they all have a very similar structure. And depending on the type of document, that structure can shift based on certain requirements. And I was like, we can automate that. And so then every time you create a document, you type in the names of the signers and you just say which documents those people sign. And then the signature pages could just automatically generate. So instead of having to do things over and over. So I just looked at every part of the process that was repetitive, every part that was, that we could try to streamline. And so we wanted to do that. We wanted to say, let's help you get all the way through this process. And if we do, then at the end, we can create that automatic closing book. So instead of Scott getting it 6 months later, it was 3 volumes. He could get it that day, on the day the deal is done. And so
and they get that in the cloud, or they get that Dropbox. How did that?
They get they can take the closing book and deliver it, via secure email.
Okay.
So they can, kind of get the closing book. They can take it to be bound. If someone wants a physical copy, it could be put to a CD the way they used to be, or a USB drive, or whatever the way that people want to receive it. But the goal was just to say, let's put this thing in a process and really kind of try to take out the repetitive parts of it and make it a real collaborative space where attorneys and their clients can really engage with each other.
Excellent. And the questions are coming in. And naturally, Adam asks, how did your customer surprise you? And that, by the way, I do want to mention, you very succinctly told me what the product did. And I want that to be clear to listeners and viewers afterwards, or podcast listeners. You did the elevator pitch, but just did it really succinct. I can tell you had to do this over and over and over. And but that's great, right? Because sometimes we get somebody real new, and it's long and complicated, and you can lose your, if you're looking for an investor, that's who you lose in that time. So I really appreciate how you put that together.
No, and I think that's such a good thing to call out, because it is one of the harder things to do. When you do it, when you've done it enough, you can do it and it sounds kind of like an effortless thing. It's just in your mind. But to get to that point, there's so many moments where you're like, I want to tell everyone why I'm so passionate about it. And I want them to understand. And there's so much you want to share, so many things that it does. And you realize what you really have to share is what is the problem you're solving and why do people care about it? And that goes into, if we can talk more about raising capital and things like that, but there's so many things I learned through High Alpha and their team and I had helped people pitch their business for years as an attorney, but you learned so much about when you're in it, when you're so passionate about it, when every feature means something to you, you want to
share the feature, right?
Share the feature. And the investors don't care about the feature. They care about, is the problem real and can you solve it? And so why can you solve it better and for more money than other people? So, but yeah, so how did customers surprise me? I mean, customers surprise you every day. So it's a tough one. When you go in and you're looking at a more complex problem, so you're looking at a transaction as a whole, you can look at the transaction completely, you can look at one part of it. And so, we really tried to start with the closing process. And I remember the first moment, and this is Casey Flaherty wrote an article about this. We were actually just talking about it yesterday because he was in Chicago, but
okay.
Attorneys, there's so many discrete problems you can solve, but there's that hurdle to get them to try it, and they want it to be magical. They know that okay, so your biggest pain point is that you have to put 100 signature pages together for this deal, and you're going to do the same block over and over and over and over. What if I can do this? I make it automatically happen. So then let's say one of the people isn't signing, they can't sign, they're traveling, and you need to replace it. God, you'd have to go into those documents and do it all over again. So we're going through like how this is really streamlining all of the process.
And when you say you have to do it all over again, are we talking find and replace?
You are exactly right.
Yeah,
And then print it all and repacket it and then resend it to the new person. And you could make, in our system, you could change the name and it would repopulate everything and repacket it for them. And so here I am showing this for the first time to a customer. And I'm so excited because it's like we'd done the signatures in a different way as we worked to evolve it. And I was so excited to show it. And they go, it appears that the font choice you used for your signature page things is Times New Roman 12, which I was like, no, actually it was the Times New Roman 11, which is my preference of font size. And they're like, but we prefer Times New Roman 12.
Which is like, that's lawyer standard, a lot of standard, right? Like, I don't even use Times New Roman anymore because I hate it.
So literally they're like, can you change the font size or the font? And I was like, not yet. You're the first person that's seen it. And they were like, oh. And I was like, I just changed your life.
Yeah. Like, did you not see the problem that was solved? You're hooked on a font.
Magic. There was literally magic on the screen for you. And you got caught up in this tiny detail that I can fix within like an hour with an engineer.
Right.
But it's that the thing I think that surprises you about customers is that you can solve incredibly painful parts of the process, but sometimes there's this like hesitation that if it doesn't solve every problem, then it's not worth the pain of figuring out how to adopt it. And there is a thing where it's like, you should like, it's incremental. Let's find incremental benefits, because then if you try to offer them the full solutions, then some people try to build the full solution or build broader, and then you're always going to be shallow. And so you're then going to have to go back in. And so we did both. We sometimes would respond and try to build wider and add in more features that covered more aspects. And then that didn't allow us to go as deep. And so it was one of the biggest like early lessons is to really understand, but also to like remain firm on the value prop that you're delivering at the moment, and like showing how that is enough and that it's actually going to be easier for them to learn this segment of the system as opposed to trying to change an entire behavior. And they can come with us on the journey as we expand. And so I think that was what surprised me, is that everyone's so used to their iPhone, it can do everything, it can do it so fast, and I can learn it in 5 seconds. So understanding that, change is hard, and incremental change is still change.
It's still
beneficial. It's still helping them, and it almost is easier from an adoption perspective. So it's a lot of, I think too, as you said, when I pointed out that like the efficiency of like the billable hour is a deterrent sometimes. But there's so many, it's like, how do you position it and how do you make sure that they understand the problem you're solving and can come on the journey with you? So
if I understand now, I've never practiced and I'm grateful for that. But if I understand correctly, what you were solving with Doxly before it became part of Litera, that is generally non-billable time, right? That formatting.
Yeah,
so
it's hard.
Like we have to get lawyers past you can't really bill for that. So why not make that part easier?
Yeah, exactly. It is like, you can try to people try, but it's such a hard thing. And honestly, you lose credibility with your clients when you're trying to say that all of this closing process stuff is, and honestly, there was an even a bigger thing is that once you do a closing, you actually set a price as to for the flow of funds, what the legal fees are going to be. And every day that it takes you to close beyond that, every hour that you're doing more things, your kind of realization rate just goes down and down on the deal. So you may be at 100% before the deal closes because you've kind of, you set the price at somewhere, but all of this administrative stuff just eats away at it. And, it's burnout for attorneys. You're doing it in that time period. you couldn't do it at home because you couldn't print all these documents and all these signature pages at home. So you'd be at the office at like 3 a.m. trying to put signature pages together because you did work a full day on moving the deal forward. This was the only time that you could do it.
Formatting this thing.
And then you're like, oh shit, I forgot how to use the scanner again.
Uh,
No one is here to help me. So all of that sort of stuff came into play too.
That's great. That's excellent. And Maureen asks, Maureen's a former guest of the show as well. She asks, how was the development done on Doxly? How did you have local developers? Is that what you're asking, Maureen? I'm wondering, I'm adding to your question. Did you have local developers? Was it some local, some out of country? How did you do that?
Yeah. So we started, so because High Alpha did all the designs, they were like, wanted us to get started really fast. And so we were using an outsourced development shop to start. That was actually a mistake. So as they were starting to work on it, they're usually used to doing front end code, but not as much the back end. But they're like, we've got back end developers now, we can take the project on, we can do it quickly. Well, at the same time, we were hiring our VP of engineering and getting started with that process. And so when he came on, he actually, before he even started officially at Doxly, he was like helping coordinate like with these developers. He ended up having to, it's a funny like debate as to who was employee number one, because I guess I don't count as employee one. So it was Moses and Ben. So we've had this ongoing eternal debate as to who was employee one. But so Moses was our VP of engineering. Ben came to us through this TechPoint program. He came just out of college, and the two of them sat at a table and recoded the entire thing that the other group had developed, because they just needed to redo it. So then technically from that point on, 100% of the development work on Doxly was done by the team we hired. So we had a small team that was just incredible. So there was a team of at the start, it was like 4 engineers, and which included our VP, and they just did an insane amount of amazing work. Moses was VP. Ben came right out of Purdue. Maggie came from a coding, had worked just a little bit after a coding academy. So we hired a lot out of a coding academy in Indianapolis, and Moses taught them and, continued their education from the coding academy, and they're all absolutely amazing still. And then we built the engineering team from there, but it is a really special group that like really came together. And I was like, to me, and the engineering part just seemed like magic. Like they're little magicians that just made all these things happen, and you'd ask for something and then it would just appear, and you're like, okay, it was really impressive what they could do and what they could build.
That's great. That's great. And we have another question from a founder, early stage founder. Jasmine asks, how was that early development funded?
Yeah. So when High Alpha, when we won the sprint week, High Alpha put like 500 grand into the company in order to get it started. So we were able to hire some of the first developers with that. But that's, in startup world, like when you're hiring a couple of developers and you've got a couple of team members, that can go pretty quickly.
Pretty quick.
So I was tasked with like kind of raising capital right from there. And so I left officially. So I did decide that I couldn't pass up being CEO. Every day that I worked on it, I was like, okay, I can't give up this opportunity. And then in that moment of like, how do you sign back your equity in the partnership? That's a moment. You're like, I can do this. And you're like, I do this?
I just earned this, literally just earned this.
This is great. Here, I was like, are you sure? Do I have to? And then I guess
you don't want to just give this to me, right?
Yeah, like I can just I'll hold on to this for a while. So I was like, but and I had the conversation. Like Ice Miller has one of the most amazing managing partners like I've ever come across. He was a former head of the corporate group, Steve Humke. And when I went to talk to him and told him that I was going to leave, and I told him why, he was like, we introduced you to High Alpha thinking they would take the business forward so you could stay here.
Right.
Like, yeah. I mean, I get that. Not how it worked out, but But he was like, the high alpha team is amazing. And if you're going to go do something in business, like you won't get to work with better people. And I had thought to myself, like the biggest risk is that, okay, so let's say the worst happens, the company absolutely fails. I work with a lot of startup founders. I work with a lot of VCs. What better education on the experiences of my client than going through it, whether it's an amazing success or I go down in flames. Like I will have learned something so valuable that I can be a much better attorney. So if the worst case scenario is I go back to being an attorney, it's pretty okay.
Pretty good fallback, right?
It's pretty good fallback. So that was the risk analysis there. Still pretty painful, but decision to make. So then it was like, okay, I started in May and they're like, okay, Haley, you got to raise capital. So we had to put the deck together, start pitching people. And I think it was, so I get out the question a lot, like, how awful was the fundraising experience? I was like, oh, it was my favorite part. Like,
that's interesting because that's not everybody. A lot of people don't like that part.
No, we raised 2.3 million in 30 days without a product.
Wow. Well, now you have to tell us how you did that. Did it help that you had that high alpha to begin with?
That was definitely a help. So that was, they were able to get intros or help me get intros. Although it was interesting. I think the thing that I've always done is, networking is hard and it can be really painful. And I used to stand in the corner with like one other person from the law firm and just like stand there and like, we were like, well, we were here. So that counts for business development.
Right.
And then I started making myself like meet like one more person than I did the last time and everything. Okay. So High Alpha had an event where they were, our Tech Point, this big state tech organization, brings in a lot of investors and tries to bring money into the state. And so High Alpha was hosting a happy hour before a big event they had, and they had a bunch of VCs come in. And a lot of there was a cohort of us that had a couple of guys that had become CEOs of High Alpha companies before me. So they invited us all to come and meet these people. And, not everyone came because they were like, I've got to focus on building this business. And I was like, some of these people are way too advanced for us. And so I went and I stayed and I met with a bunch of people, and I met someone that was connected to Next Law Ventures randomly. And so I stayed through past the entire thing. So actually the first investor that we had signed on was because of that connection I made at that event. And so he was like, well, have you ever met John Fernandez? And I was like, no. And he's like, oh, he was the mayor of Bloomington. Now he's at Denton's. And so that turned into that. So I got it connected to John. That was the first actual investor. And I was actually in a pitch for other investors when their commitment came in. And Scott was like, Haley, check your email. And I was like, in the middle of a presentation, my computer is showing on the screen. Like, are you sure? And so I did. And it was an email from John saying that they were in and what amount they were in for. And it does help raise capital in a room full of investors when another investor becomes kind of the lead of it. But I think what we did was we really focused in on the story, like what really was the problem. And one benefit to it is that all the VCs actually understood the problem because they'd experienced it with their own counsel. They had done these deals. They knew they could understand the pain that they had been on the receiving end of. So when we pitched, we didn't just pitch on what the problem was that we were solving for the lawyers. We pitched it in a way that the people that were investing could understand and really believe in like what it was. And so there is a thing about knowing your audience, always being out there to go meet different people. We didn't even go to any of the VCs that I represented or worked with. And so we had done it so fast that they were like, Haley, let's just close it down so you can go back to working on the business. We'll do this. And so some of those people ended up coming in our second round, but like building that network of connections and understanding like who can be involved in it is something that, and doing it when you don't need them, because that was the exact same thing that would come into play when we sold Doxly. But it's like, I really wanted to meet people. I wanted to know them. I wanted to figure out who I could like introduce to them or what problem I could solve for them. So then when I went in front of them to pitch, it was authentic. I could explain the problem. I could get the meeting.
So, and I think, so this is not, I don't want this to come out the wrong way. So I'm trying to think of how, but it's you were in a very good position that maybe other founders are not in every situation. You were actually solving a problem that both sides of the equation, the investor and the lawyers, could understand relatively easy, right? That like there's a benefit to that. Is that fair to say?
I think that is fair to say. And
Okay.
I think, but here is the thing, sometimes with the legal problems with the investors, you've got to, and any investor you pitch to. So let's say you're pitching in, when I would work with biotech companies and things like that, like the people that you're pitching to don't necessarily understand a single word that you're saying. And if
Right.
you go into all this like really minute detail about drug pathways and things like that, you've lost them. If you can explain and get them to understand, they don't have to have experienced the exact
Sure.
pain, but you have to like show them like that it is painful and
Right.
that people are experiencing it. And it's investments and fundraising is storytelling. It is getting people to understand the problem. So when you get caught up in features, when you get caught up in like your own personal story too much, you can distract people from like what that there is a real pain. People are experiencing it. Here is a relatable story as to how that it's experienced then. And then that person isn't just one person. There's a whole big universe of those people experiencing that pain. So there is a market. And
Right.
it's like, it's taking people through kind of this journey. And I represented someone who was like, I'm a female founder, and they just told me that this was like kind of like a side project. And that was really insulting. And I go, okay, well, tell me how you explained it. And they were doing something that they were very big company analogs. And I was like, well, did you talk about this? And they're like, no, I never mentioned that. And did you talk about this? And I was like, you needed to show them there was a clear market for what you were trying to accomplish. And there are similar markets that are well established that aren't overlapping, but that show the pathway, that show the possibility. And it's like, if you just get caught up in just this personal experience and the features that go with it, and not figuring out how to, if they don't immediately understand the pain, you have to show them that somewhat the pain is real and how you can like translate that into something that they can see. So it is a lot. I did have that benefit, but the benefit was also that I could tell them about that.
Yes, I don't take away from what you accomplished. Because I didn't mean it to come across that way. Okay. Yeah. I was thinking about, it was a unique problem where you were able to, the customer that you were selling it to understood the problem, and the investor that you were selling it to understood how long this takes. So that kind of a unique and excellent spot to be in there. Or is maybe as good as that kind of a spot could get, not taken away from everything that you guys were developing. I know we've got maybe 8 minutes left with you. I don't want to keep you all night. I know she showed me before we started that she's going law school with the cocktail. Has got the Red Bull and vodka as well as some coffee. So I don't want to keep her all night, but so folks, if you have a couple more questions, one or two more questions for Haley, I promise I'll have her come back. I see how many people are watching tonight. I get it. I'll ask her to come back. Haley, will you come back in the future to go through some more of this? Thank you. But I do feel like big week for the Litera had acquired Doxly in 2019, and we probably should touch on the acquisition, but I feel like you've shared so much that I really want to get to the acquisition of Litera purchasing or acquiring Cura Systems. So if anybody has questions specifically about the acquisition of Doxly, please get those in and we'll come back to them at the end. But kind of a big week. Cura Systems, big CLM company. Noah Weisberg was on the show earlier this year, and it's big news for LegalTech, right? I mean, two big companies now kind of combining, successful LegalTech companies, and Litera has just been on a tear in purchasing. Tell us what you can tell us about the acquisition.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we think is really important is what problems do our customers think are important for us to help solve? We evolved from a drafting business into realizing that it's not just one document that we have to have people draft. We have to put them into context within a case or a transaction. And that's where we're into litigation workflow and transaction workflow. And then we need to understand more about the matter in order to help people really, get the business set up, the matter set up well from the beginning. But so we really spend a time like trying to understand from our customers, what are those specific pain points? Do we need to build it? Or is there best in class technology that we can bring in to more effectively solve these complex workflows faster? And so when you think of the transaction world, or Doxly, which is now Litera Transact combined with Berkshire Transact, we're looking at all these M&A, real estate, corporate financing, these big transactions where you're trying to manage all the documents, but the diligence process of it is an incredibly critical part. Companies have thousands of documents and contracts that underlie the deal. And in order for a law firm to like effectively represent them, the client through an exit, they need to understand like, what is that set of documents? What's the risk if they represent the buyer that they're taking on as they go through it? And Kira can analyze thousands of agreements incredibly quickly, really point out some of these like provisions in different agreements. So you can say, okay, here's all my employment agreements. Here's all my vendor agreements. Here's my customer agreements. Do I have any change of control issues? Do I have any most favored nation or type clauses that are going to like cause me trouble if I want to acquire this company? And so they can synthesize incredible amounts of data and give people understanding of it. And right now the cost pressure is on people to do diligence faster and to do it at a lower cost. And that means usually reviewing less documents. That doesn't mean that there's less risk. It just means that
Right.
the finding the needle in the haystack just got harder. And so from the client, if you have 100 NDAs and they say pick 10 and the 10 you pick doesn't include the one with the clause that's troubled, it's not that the client remembers that they only asked you to review 10. Well, they'll say, yeah, I wanted you to review 10. How come that wasn't in the 10? And it's like, well, I'm like, my ability to just like, you pick the highest 10 values. Sometimes like you make all these choices and you don't have to make the choice. Like because Kira exists, there's no choices that you have to make. You could run all 100 of them through it and it will identify the 10 you need to look at. And so that ability to mitigate risk, to help people effectively do things is just super amazing in this. And it can do it not just for diligence and things like that. It's all sorts of contracts that attorneys, it works in the corporate context and law firm. And we feel like we're really well positioned to help them continue that mission and to pair it with the overall workflow that sits around a transaction. So for us, we looked at it, here is this complicated workflow, and here is a critical piece in that workflow that we can help bring together and reduce the amount of places that people have to go, allow the data to be more streamlined across processes. Like we don't think that all technology has to be integrated into a single robot. In fact, we think it shouldn't, because the interfaces that people developed for people to interact with it is very important, but the flow of data, the ability to connect systems together and to make them more effective by allowing information. So if the information from diligence that you need to address could flow right into the closing checklist, that would be, that makes it so much easier and so much more streamlined. So
it sounds like a lot of the front ends may be staying the same, but the back ends interacting or integrated.
Yeah. So yes, exactly. And then we have our firm intelligence tool and foundation that we bought at the beginning of the year, and that we can take the data from the deal and inform like the matter profile. So when I go to have a new matter, I can actually say, okay, what is the new matter? What is the like if I want to do another M&A transaction and I want to be able to better staff it, I want to be able to better price it, I can take now the data that Kira can take from Transact on what were the key terms of the transaction. And now when I go to set up a new matter, I can look for similar matters, which means I can use like the Clocktomizer data to say, okay, what did we do in this matter? How did we price it? And like who has the expertise to be staffed on this next deal? And so the goal for us is this information can like filter through all these different systems, and it just gets enhanced by each system it goes through, so that you can make smarter decisions and take knowledge that lives in the law firm and make it actionable.
Very cool. Very cool. And interesting. It's really fascinating. I mean, just your career has been very much on this transactional side, and now it started in transactions. Now improving transactions seems to be the continuation of your career, which is really cool. I don't want to keep you all night. We have Michelle Spencer joining us. She said, "Hi, Haley. We met last year during Litera TV. Wanted to say hi during the lull." And Veronica has said that this sounds awesome over here on the Facebook. So thank you, Veronica, Adam, Jasmine, Maureen. Any last questions, please get them in. Otherwise, I don't want to keep Haley all night. It's later where she's at. Haley, where do people find you online?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and Haley Altman. I'm on LinkedIn, and then I'm on Twitter at Haley_Altman.
I believe it is Haley_Altman, but I will double check while we're talking. So yes, she's on Twitter at, let's see, you just tweeted. Yes, Haley_Altman on Twitter. Haley Altman on LinkedIn. And if they want to reach out to you, what's the best way to contact you?
You can honestly, you can message me on LinkedIn and I'll get it, and that'll be a super easy way to do it.
Great. I thank you so much for sharing your experience in your journey with us. And I mean it. I think you got to come back, because there was so much to fit into one meeting here that I think there's so much more that you can really share with the startup LegalTech startup space, that I'm really actually I'm upset that I hadn't had you on earlier. So please.
I'm super passionate about it.
Apology.
I love startups. I love the community. I love helping people like kind of figure out, kind of some of the, you learn so many things, like you do so many things where you're like, oh man, I could have done that so differently, but it all like helps you along the way. So I'm always happy to like share more about the journey. And
that you shared some really fantastic stuff tonight. So I thank you for that. And thank you for being so candid with folks. The experience really shows. So thank you for that. Don't disappear when we stop recording. I'll tell you about some of the follow-up stuff. But my guest tonight, of course, was Haley Altman of Litera. It looks like Prashant joined late here. Thanks, Maureen. Have a good one. Prashant, we're just about to wrap up, but you can catch the replay over on Facebook. Again, my guest tonight was Haley Altman. She is the global head
of corporate development, also like the CEO of Long Titles.
CEO of Long Titles, global head of corporate development, not legal development, corporate development at Litera, former CEO and co-founder of Doxly. Next week, join us, folks. We are going to have Felicitas and Areta. They are co-founders of Get the Docs, and they're from Europe. So we'll continue on with our female founder series. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Nick. This is awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Have a good evening, everybody.